So this weekend, The Accountant came out, which is directed by Gavin O'Connor, and he directed one of my favorite movies of all time, Warrior, so I thought this would be a good time to talk about it. To give you a heads up on how I'm going to do this review, essentially I'm going to do a spoiler-free review, give my rating, and then I'm going to start a spoiler discussion. So if you've never seen the movie before, please watch the review and then stop whenever the spoilers start. I want to convince you to watch the movie because I love it and I want you to love it, and I think you will love it. But I don't want to spoil it for you. Warrior is essentially a sports drama about three characters. A family man who's fallen on hard times, a veteran with a mysterious and very broken past, and a recovering alcoholic trainer who's trying to be on the path of redemption. Now, I'm intentionally keeping all of that very vague because I want you to go on the journey with them as you see how their lives intertwine as it all comes together in an MMA tournament in one of the best final hours of a movie I can think of. Now, I'm not joking when I say that I drop everything if the second hour of this movie comes on because it builds off the first hour so well and pays off so powerfully over and over again for an hour straight. It's so well crafted. There's literally been times I've woken up at like 2, 3 in the morning and my wife had put it on or something like that, and I stayed up to watch it until 4 in the morning just because I had to watch it because it's so good. So on the good side, like with all good sports dramas, the sports comes secondary to the character moments and the development and the journey that they're on. The sport is the way by which these characters are redeemed and developed and progress forward, which makes for each one of their victories even so much more powerful and each one of their losses even so much more painful. As you go on this journey, you really care about each one of these characters and want all of them to be victorious and win for different reasons, even though they're really coming head with each other and they're competing against one another. Speaking of the characters, the acting is just phenomenal in this. Nick Nolte was actually nominated for an Oscar for his performance in this movie, and he's playing off these other actors that are just incredible. So this is really the second movie where Tom Hardy came to my attention. I'd seen him in Inception. I was like, oh, the fun, charming guy. Then he was cast as Bane, and then I saw him in this movie, and you see him in this movie, and I immediately went, oh my goodness, this guy's going to be kill it as Bane because he's such a physical presence, so terrifying to look at just by the look on his face, and the guy can really act, and you see that in this movie as just this tortured soul plagued by his past, and you see that. And then on the flip side of that, you have Joel Edgerton, who's the family man who isn't a tortured soul. He's like a very normal, balanced guy that's very likable, that also is just a great physical specimen that can compete in MMA, and you believe that as you're watching him. And I've seen some of the behind-the-scenes stuff on it, and while Tom Hardy is the one that actually is kind of like the physically dominant one of the two, Joel Edgerton was one that actually had a background in athleticism, and so actually you see that a lot more in the choreography, and Joel Edgerton's really doing these scissor kicks and takedowns and all of it, and you can see his face doing this stuff, and you believe that he's competing in MMA. And so the performances are wonderful. Just the physicality that both of these two guys brought to the role was wonderful. But really what makes the movie work is that characters have real motivations, that you really want them to succeed and move forward, but they're behaving like real people. They make mistakes along the way. Characters that you like and want them to succeed do foolish things that get them in trouble. When you do foolish things, there are consequences in the movie. When you get angry with people, that has relational conflict with them, and that's what drives the drama in the movie. It's not contrived situations. It's not made up stuff. It's real things that happen with real people, and you see that played out in kind of an extreme situation that, most of us can't relate to competing on a national MMA level, but we can relate to the story because we can see people in desperate situations. We can see broken people who are hurting people. We can see someone on a path of redemption while being still a very broken person that's gonna screw up along the way. And that's what this movie gives us that makes it so powerful and so wonderful to watch. And since it is a sports movie, you have to talk about the sport, and that's MMA, and the fights are choreographed really, really well. If you've seen any actual MMA, you see stuff in this that actually happens in MMA fights, and it's of course a movie version of MMA. It's a lot faster paced. It's cutting straight to all the good stuff, much more than you would see in any one single MMA fight, but it plays out very realistic while being engaging, fun to watch, and because you care about the characters, you're invested emotionally in it. And the music in this movie, to sidetrack just a little, the music is just so perfectly used to swell at just the right times that you really care. And you're just seeing two guys on the ground in an arm lock and a headlock, and it just swells. It's so powerful in these moments because you care about what is happening emotionally with that person and their motivation for what they're doing and the pain that they're going through. And you're seeing it played out with excellent fight choreography in this film. As for the bad, I hate to even have to mention bad things about this movie because it is one of my favorites. I absolutely love it. And what I will say is there's nothing major plot problems except in the way the tournament plays out, and the way that the different people compete with each other. They portray a couple of the characters as too powerful that when you get to the end of the movie and kind of the way things play out, you can look back on it and say they could have crafted that better. And this is what I'm going to talk about in the spoiler section on the back end. But they could have crafted exactly the strengths and the weaknesses of the characters better. The way they crafted the drama emotionally between the characters, if they'd done that with the strengths and weaknesses of the different fighters in it, they could have made it, pushed it over to be like a perfect movie in my mind. That's the only flaw. And most people won't even pick up on that if you don't follow MMA, if you don't kind of know about these types of things. You might not even think about that. I've read a couple criticisms on the internet, and I was like, I agree with that. I can see that. They could have crafted that final bit a little bit better. Overall, I'm going to give this a 9.5 out of 10. It's one of my favorite movies. It's actually, I think, replaced Rocky as the sports movie I watch the most. I show it all the time. And some of that's because it's underrated. It did poorly at the box office. The people that have seen it love it, but a lot of people haven't seen it because it didn't do all that well. And so it's growing in fame basically off word of mouth. And that's why I'm doing this review. Actually, it used to be a youth pastor. I would show it to my students, even though there's an F-bomb in it. So, oops, that probably wasn't a good life choice. But I mean, I just wanted to show people about this movie because it's a great movie and a great story of redemption. And so I wanted to show it to people. So I love it. If I'm being honest, I wish I could give it a 10, but I have to give it the 9.5. I have to ding it just a little bit. If you have not seen this movie, it is a great drama. It is one of the absolute best sports movies of all time. I want everybody to go see it. I want to do everything in my power to get more people to go see this movie. And so please go check it out if you haven't seen it before. With all that said, let's talk about spoilers. And really, all I want to talk about is the way the final tournament in it was set up. And here's where I think they ran into some problems. So they established Tommy, the Tom Hardy character, as a world-class wrestler and worked with his dad and was just absolutely incredible world-class. And then they show that really in his early kind of his beat-down YouTube video deal. You see him kind of as a wrestler, and he can throw punches, but they show him as a wrestler. And then as the movie progresses and you move into the tournament, he becomes a stand-up fighter. He throws punches, and they show him as having just this knockout power that just, boom, knocks people out instantly. And so you go into the actual final tournament, and you've established him as a perfect fighter because he's world-class as a wrestler, and his punching power is unmatched and can knock out the best of people with a single punch in the first 10 seconds of a match, which is not common in MMA. So he's perfect. They set up Koba as another perfect, gigantic wrestler that is almost unstoppable, incredible wrestler, incredibly strong, incredible knockout power. Then they set up Brendan, the Joel Edgerton character, as a very good wrestler who's very smart and timed, but is over the hill. And you see him throughout the tournament at the end, just getting the crap kicked out of him, exerting so much energy throughout the whole thing because he's struggling to beat every single one of these guys, but because he cannot lose, he will not submit, he will not give up, he becomes victorious in the end. But this sets up a problem as you move into the end of the movie because it loses a certain level of credibility once he's beaten Koba, he's used everything that he has, and then he takes on the guy with the most punching power that's a world-class wrestler and still manages to beat him, and they could have set up a few things in there to make that a little bit better. So first off, what they could have done is not made Tommy the ultimate puncher that has this knockout power, or don't have him do that as many times. Have him do it one time against one guy, and then from there, show him as the most skilled technical fighter. You have it when he's angry. If he can land a punch when he's angry, he can knock somebody out. But other than that, he's a technical fighter that's very smart and calculated. So when you move to the final fight in this, he's not being calculated because he's so angry with his brother, so angry with his father, so angry with his past. He goes in there as a skilled technical wrestler that starts throwing punches. which means while he might have the strength, that's not his strong point, so he gets defeated because his anger forces him to go outside of what he's actually good at, where he actually wins and tries to just beat someone that he wants to hurt, and therefore he loses. Where his brother goes in as a calculated, intentional wrestler, and they're both world-class wrestlers, just one of them chooses to be smart about it. So they needed to do something along those lines. But the second thing is, if you have a guy that's been just had the crap kicked out of him in all these fights, and you get to the last fight, and you've got Tommy, world-class wrestler, you've got Tommy, world-class puncher, and as they showed him in the previous fights, he just goes in there and punches people one time and they knocked out. I think in 2 of his fights, he knocks the guy with one punch, and one of them he has to wrestle for just a little bit, but it's under like a minute long. So he's going entirely fresh into a fight who's against a guy who's fought 3 guys in 3 long, hard matches that went several rounds. It just stretches so much plausibility that that would happen. Even as much as you want to play that he's got heart, he won't give up, but you set it up in a way that he's broken, he's beaten, and he's taking on someone that is superior to him. And you haven't established enough pieces in there of showing us that Tommy is this skilled, calculated wrestler. You've told us in the first hour of the movie, and then you showed us him as the puncher that can't be stopped. And so I think there was a lot they could have done or not a lot, not a lot. That's actually the opposite of what they could have done. Small little tweaks, single lines of dialogue, shifting it up a little bit in what Tom Hardy did in his first few rounds in there. And that you see him as absolutely world-class wrestler, man, and that's how he's able to beat people. And that's maybe what was even missing. Instead of having him walk out, throw one punch, the guy goes down, you have him run out there as a world-class wrestler, take the guy down, and does a ground and pound and knocks the guy out. But then he takes on a different world-class wrestler, and he tries to ground and pound his brother, who's also just as good as him and had some of the same training as him. He can't do it. That's what they needed. It seems like a small tweak, but the nature of the movie, because it's all about someone overcoming things, the plausibility of it is extraordinarily important, and you can't establish 2 different fighters as being unstoppable world-class wrestler people, and then the guy that's a teacher that was a kind of lousy MMA fighter when he was an MMA fighter beats all of them, and you don't build any sort of credibility into that. So that's the flaw that I have with it. And so perhaps even in the Koba fight, maybe build into a little bit more. Koba shows up out of shape, thinking he's just going to trounce through this. It's just a show, and there's a teacher in here. Why am I taking on a teacher? But they didn't do that as much as they really should have. So that's my thoughts on it. What do you think about the movie Warrior? Does it have any flaws? Am I just nitpicking the end of it? Or has that always bugged you too, that perhaps they could have done a little bit more there at the end or in the last hour to set up how Brendan would actually be victorious in the tournament? Because basically their whole mechanism in the last hour was, he can't give up. He'll just keep fighting until the end to save his house. Which is good, but you can build into the story as well. He won't give up, and there's a reason that these people were vulnerable, and him as the smart, calculated fighter that absolutely has to win. So he's going to do the smartest, most intentional. He's going to listen to his coach. He's going to do everything he can and hold out till the very... They could have done it just a little bit better. What do you think? Tell me in the comment section. I'd love to talk about Warrior with you because I love this movie. I'd love it if you would tell everybody you know about the movie Warrior, because it is a wonderful sports movie with great, powerful character moments, with great characters that you root for, that you care about. Love, love, love this movie. Love to talk about it with you. If you've never seen one of my videos before, never clicked that subscribe button, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching.